simple question really. Has DEFRA modelled the impact of a no-deal Brexit on the sustainability of fisheries in UK waters and the UK fishing industry more generally?
We've done a lot of no-deal planning. In the event of no deal, we would effectively...
no-deal planning, I'm talking about impact of a no-deal Brexit. That's not no-deal planning, so have you modelled the impact of a no-deal Brexit?
And modelled what aspect of it?
On the sustainability of fisheries in UK waters. And the UK fishing industry more generally. In other words, on the sustainability of the stocks and the long-term industry, and on the UK industry more generally. It's quite a simple question.
Well, and also, Minister, naturally trading that fish back into the EU, which is going to be the biggest issue.
So have you modelled the impact? It's quite a simple question, George.
It depends what you mean by a model, but I'll do my best to answer.
Modelling the impact means what is going to be the impact.
Yes.
Let's put it another way, the no-deal Brexit on the UK fishing industry.
Yes.
Let's put it more simply.
Okay. In a no-deal Brexit, there's no transition agreement. We leave as an independent coastal state next March, and we have control of all the fisheries resources in our waters.
I know that, but what's going to be the impact of that on the
impact is that gives fishermen a big increase in their fishing opportunities because we will have control of our own resources.
And what about fishermen fishing off the coast of France?
There will be annual negotiations just as we have now with Norway and Faroes and others.
What, in a no-deal Brexit, there'll be no mechanism for doing that?
There will. We'll be rejoining NIAFC, which is the North East Atlantic Fisheries Commission.
So you've done the modelling of an impact? You've modelled an impact, clearly, if you've thought this through.
Yes, and it's in the white paper.
So what's the impact in terms of GDP, in terms of the numbers of vessels, in terms of any loss of industry? What's the impact?
Well, the industry has nothing to fear from a no-deal Brexit because fishing is one of the key areas where we would gain by having that more rapid control of our waters.
Can we have the figures then to prove that? If you've got that view.
Yes, it's in the annex. If you look in the annex to the white paper, it sets out what zonal attachment means.
So, but that's not in terms of a no Brexit scenario.
That would, whether we have a deal or don't have a deal, our view is that we become an independent coastal state. So
you're saying there's no impact in terms. A no deal Brexit means they will have no impact whatsoever on the UK fishing industry.
It would be positive because international law will take over.
Positive impact. So a no-deal Brexit will have a positive impact.
Brexit will have leaving the EU is positive for the UK fishing industry, whether there is an agreement or whether there is not an agreement.
Well, that's quite staggering. Is DEFRA going to publish a technical note on this, on fisheries?
Yeah. We have published.
We are.
Yes.
No. Okay. Thank you.
I mean, in this no-deal Brexit, I can understand quite rightly that if we get our waters back quicker, we got a lot more fish, potentially we can catch a lot more fish. So that is good news, I accept that. The issue surely to look at is whether this fish is then tradable. Because a lot of our fish, especially what we catch in the southwest, is traded straight over to the continent. So that must also be looked at. Has it?
Well, in the event of tariffs, it's very important to remember that tariffs may have some impact on demand, but principally it would be a tax on European consumers buying those British products. It would be a bit like putting VAT on food, yes, if you put VAT on food, you might affect demand for certain things, and if you put tariffs on food, you might affect demand for it, but it would be a tax on European consumers.
So your view is that there is a good demand in Europe for fish, and provide, like I said, and if the Europeans put a tariff on it, then naturally they would put the price up of their own fish at the same time, basically, and to the consumers of the rest of the European Union. That's
right.
So therefore, you think it's unlikely that the EU would put a tariff on.
Well, I think the most likely scenario is that actually we have a free trade agreement that's concluded, and that we have a transition period to give people time to prepare for that. But We are obviously having to do thoughts and preparations on what would happen in there.
Yeah, so Andrew, you come back in, and then I got Kerry, Allen, and then Cheryl.
The second part of my question is to focus on the other very important part of the fishing industry, which is overlooked in this debate, which is processing. The UK has the biggest fish processing sector in Europe. Have you modelled the impact of a no-deal Brexit on the processing side of the industry?
I don't know that we've done a specific modelling on that, but we are working very, very closely with those processors.
It has 18,000 jobs.
Yes.
4,000 of those are in Grimsby. I think the people of Grimsby will be very concerned to hear that there is no modelling in terms of how to manage a no-deal Brexit on that port.
Well, the issues...
70% of its fish comes from Iceland.
That's right.
So
it's fish that's imported.
It's the biggest fish processing port in Britain. Sorry, Alan, it just is, apparently just. It will have a massive impact on Scottish processing and on the North East coast. And you've done no modelling.
Well, our objective, obviously, is to get a free trade agreement.
I'm talking about no deal. If there's no deal, you must be planning for a no deal outcome. Yeah. Because the impact, we heard evidence last November that the impact of a no deal on the fish processing sector will be really serious. So what work has been done to model the impact? We must know what the impact is.
So, I think the point you made about the fact that most of this fish that comes into those processors comes from outside the EU now, so it comes from Iceland and it comes from Norway, so it's imported either via the EU or directly to us at the moment.
Yes.
But we will have more control over what we do in terms of those imports, because it doesn't relate to our deal with the EU. It's about how
the
we
single
manage
market
that
is critical. You know that is critical to that importation of fish. And the freshness of the fish and no delays at borders, no opening the container. The moment those containers are opened,
but that will be under
the fish
our
starts
control.
to deteriorate. No, it won't be. You'll have to. There will be border checks, and we'll not be able to import that fish under single market arrangements. That's what we're hearing from you is an assumption. Where's the impact? Where's the evidence?
There won't be any problem in terms of importing those goods, because we'll have agreements with Iceland and Norway and others. And indeed, one of their primary objectives at the moment is to ensure they've still got access to the UK
Norway and Iceland
market.
are in the single market.
Not for fisheries. Fisheries isn't covered by the single market.
No, they are. And common fisheries policy isn't covered in Norway.
They have a
and
preferential
Iceland.
trade agreement on fisheries with the EU, and in future they'd have a trade agreement with us on issues such as fisheries.
So you have modelled the impact of a no-deal Brexit.
Well, the concern...
We're not getting straight answers here, and it's so important. 18,000 jobs depend on it.
There isn't. There won't be any issue in terms of importing fish from Iceland and Norway. We'll have control of our trade policy. We would be able to unilaterally set tariffs or set an ATQ, as we do now, exactly where you want it for those fisheries products. That's not dependent on
Are you
the
preparing for that now?
We've done all of that working as part of our contingency planning, yes, exactly. And
you're confident that Norway and Iceland will independently be able to import fish under preferential arrangements into the UK, even though they are effectively part of the single market?
That's what they want, yes. It's the most important thing for them to secure is access to the UK market, because it's for fisheries products, it's the most important market for them.
I think a written note on this would be really helpful, because that's not our understanding, my understanding of what's on offer.
I think that there's a separate issue. If I were to, so I don't understand there isn't a concern in terms of importing fish from Iceland or Norway. That is something that a future UK government could unilaterally decide to do. And I've met, for instance, the Icelandic ambassador, and in fact having access to the UK market for fisheries products is something that they're very keen to continue to have. The same would be true of Norway, because we're a very important market for them. The issue that's raised by some processors, and we're completely acutely aware of, and that's why we're aiming to get this free trade agreement, is that they sometimes then process that fish here and re-export to the EU market.
Exactly.
So it's the export, not the import, that is the issue that causes.
And what's your modelling? If what you say is true, I absolutely understand the point about exporting. What modelling have you done to measure the impact of a no-deal Brexit on the exportation of processed products in the UK?
It's actually very hard to do, because there may be a tariff that is applied but there wouldn't. It's not a ban on.
Well, you must be modelling. I mean, modelling is about a range of scenarios. I mean, I'm not denying that it's not easy to do, but surely the department's doing it. That's what you're there for. That's what the civil servants are there for.
Well, I can tell you this, in talking
You're
with...
You're not preparing, are you, George? You're not preparing
yes.
for a no-deal Brexit.
Of course we are. We've been, it's been part of our contingency planning from day one.
You're not giving me any confidence this morning that you're doing that, if I'm honest.
We are doing that, and as Dominic Raab set out recently, in a no-deal scenario, we would be taking unilateral decisions as a country when it comes to autonomous tariff rate process.
What will the impact be on the processing sector? You've not given us an answer this morning on this. What will the impact be on fish processing?
Well, I don't. We don't have particular modelling that that we've done specifically on this particular industry. But the challenge and the issue that they face is no different than any other sector of the UK economy, which is that they do. So
we've got no modelling for any sector of the UK economy then on that basis.
Well, we don't. We basically, as I've said earlier, if the EU put tariffs on these goods, it would essentially be a tax on the EU consumers, because ultimately they do have to get their fish from somewhere.
Yeah, sorry, that's a specific scenario. But all we need to hear is that are all the various scenarios that could emerge from a no-deal Brexit are being assessed for impact. Are they being assessed? As part of our detailed planning, obviously we're thinking about the whole issue of tariffs across a range of sectors, what the impacts might be, what our approach might be. So when can we look forward to the fruits of this labour? When can we look forward to having the technical information, the technical detail, the analysis of what the impact of a no-deal Brexit will be on fish processing and on the catching side? When can we look forward to it? Well, at the moment, we are focused on delivering a deal. So I think we can all look forward to getting an agreement later this autumn. When can we look forward? If you're doing the work, George, you've just said the department's doing the work. When can we look forward to seeing it? Well, the Department for Exiting the EU obviously hold the ring on a lot of these areas. They coordinate all of this. Government is doing a lot of planning, a lot of thinking in these areas. But we've been consistent all along that we're not going to share or publish all of the analysis that we've done, simply because we should not undermine our negotiating position. I didn't. But okay then. So when will you see the documents that measure the impact of a no-deal Brexit? When is the scheduled date for you to examine, as a minister, civil servant, to present you with the documents? Here, Minister, here are the scenarios, here are the potential impacts of a no-deal Brexit. When do you look forward to seeing those documents? Well, I have access to all sorts of analysis that's been done over the last year or more in this area. So I have regular updates on concerns of particular industries. I've had regular meetings with the fish processing industry, so we're very conscious of those. When are you looking forward to seeing the documents that your civil servants have produced, or that DEXU civil servants have been produced for you, that will measure the potential impacts of a no-deal Brexit? Nothing to do with talking to the industry. When do you look forward to seeing those documents? Well, Surely, Minister, you can't make. I mean, this is the job, isn't it? Yes, but I see many documents on these things. So there's nothing is withheld from me. It's an issue really of how much is right for a government to publish when actually you're in the middle of a negotiation. When are you going to see it, Minister? I'm moving on from publication. When are you going to see it? It will reassure people, yes, parliamentarians, to know that civil servants and ministers are assessing properly the potential impacts of a no-deal Brexit. And this morning we're talking about fisheries. So when are you going to have the documents? I've already seen documents, and indeed we've already published some documents and given members access to the library to see it, which sets out in great detail how much fish we import, under what terms it's imported, what preferential trade agreements would need to be rolled forward, and indeed how it's exported, what percentage of that is exported to
the European market, and so on and so forth. And we've actually published some of that.
That's not an impact. But anyway, Chair, I think we'll have to leave it there because we're going round in circles.
I mean, Minister,